What is going on, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of the Funnel Vision Show. I am excited for today's episode because, as usual on the Funnel Vision Show, we are here to talk about performance marketing. We're here to talk about how can we level up our game and become better marketers and really ultimately help businesses generate more money. And we have a guest today who is an expert at this, specifically when it comes to the bottom of the funnel, paid advertising, just direct response. Let's get people in the door. Let's find that 3% who are ready to buy and let's get them into your calendar. If you're in the B2B space, if you're in the SaaS space, this episode is for you because we've got Chris Roche on the call today and on the show. Chris, welcome to the show.
Hi, thanks for having me. Very excited to dive into it.
I am excited too. And as we normally start with this show, is we always start with your not so humble bragging rights. So basically tell everybody what you've been able to do for your clients, what you've been able to do for your own business. In other words, just why should they listen to this episode?
Yeah, I'll keep this quick because I know it's a short podcast. I'm a former chief revenue officer turned digital marketer. I started my agency just under 3 years ago. We're now over 7 figures in annual revenue. We work with a plethora of different B2B SaaS companies across the world. At this point, we have clients in Israel, Australia, UK. We're based out of the United States. We're based in the Midwest and have clients coast to coast. So in terms of growing the agency and the success that we've seen with clients is something that's happened very quickly. And it's because a lot of the unique strategies that we have that a lot of marketers, agencies, I don't feel like are focused on the right metrics. And that's what I'm looking forward to giving some really actionable insights as we go through this podcast.
Yeah, this is going to be a lot of fun because you're right. Digital marketing is such a broad term. We talk about awareness, brand, et cetera. I come from the same world as you, which is how do we just get a customer? Like as quickly as humanly possible, how do we get a customer? So let's take a little step back first. I want to talk about this in 2 parts. I want to better understand your agency and your background and how you were able to grow to that 7 figures in those 3 years. So what did you do for yourself? And then let's dive a little bit deeper into what you actually do for your clients. So let's start there. Talk to me a little bit about your background and how did you start your agency and how were you able to ramp it up over the last few years?
Yeah, so like I mentioned, I started the agency on the back of being a chief revenue officer, which was on the back of exiting a software company. So this is actually my 3rd company now that I've been involved in. I would say every company I've started has got a little bit easier to grow and it's growing a little bit faster. So that's been the trend that we've seen. I also do have a 4th company that is continuing with that trend. But in terms of the way that we started Catalyst or how we've been able to grow, because of the initial relationships I had through software development, a lot of our clients that we were working with on the software development side were all approaching that Series A round where they'd been basically brought in by a lot of my marketing and my sales team's efforts to be able to attract them as clients for the software development agency. So they knew when it was their time to go and scale, they were already coming to me with questions. And that's really what gave light to, I've got to do this full time. I've got to jump on this and start an agency. So I immediately walked into 2 to 3 clients to begin with. From there, it was about expanding and really delivering the highest possible quality service. Because of the way that I'm so fixated on revenue, it's very easy to show results and to justify budget or keeping a client on a retainer because you're generating ROI for them. The issue with a lot of agencies is they focus on a lot of the vanity metrics or top of funnel metrics, which from a brand awareness standpoint, it has its place. But for most of the clients that we work with, they want an ROI and they want to go to market and scale very aggressively. So if you're not delivering that for them, you're not going to keep the client for a very long time. So part of our, secret sauce or the way we've been able to grow has been focusing on the right metrics and having really long-term clients and being able to increase that average retainer length to where our retainer length now is well over 2 years, which in the industry, it's around 3 months. So for us, we've been able to have long-term clients and that allows us to have good relationships, strong referral networks, and just being able to grow very organically and naturally because of the work that we do.
So has it been through organic and basically word of mouth and just doing great work and basically you've been able to grow because of that?
Yeah. So for us, we've spent probably less than 10,000 in 3 years on paid advertising ourselves. And the reason I say that is that a lot of people say you're an agency that doesn't invest in paid advertising, you don't believe in it, which is complete nonsense. We have a capacity issue. We can only grow so fast. We're not a SaaS product. We can't sell 100 subscriptions a month and still be okay. For us, we have a very fixed capacity. So our fixed capacity we have at the moment, that's it. We're not expanding our team. We've deliberately actually downsized to be more profitable as we've got into 2025. And we made that decision mid-2024 because we found that by having a smaller team and working with a smaller set of clients, but being more hands-on, we got better results and we picked the right type of clients. So for us, it's all been organic, word of mouth, a lot of communities, and then my personal LinkedIn profile as well. I have a small following on LinkedIn. I publish content pretty regularly on there, and that's attracted a lot of clients as well.
Nice. And the way that you currently focus your agency, it's all SaaS.
It's 90% SaaS.
90% SaaS. Okay, so let's dive a little bit into that. Let's talk about what has been the secret sauce and why you've been able to get clients. You've been able to get such great results for clients. So talk me through your background in, I know you have obviously a chief revenue officer background, but talk to me your background in terms of the skill set and what you've learned over those course of those years that you're now applying into your offerings for your clients.
Yeah, I think for me, I'm very analytical and very number orientated. So when we're coming in and analyzing current marketing efforts, the way that we look to identify if clients can be a good fit and really are we going to have the impact is most of the time when a client comes to us and we audit their accounts and we look what's currently working, they already are doing one thing very well that's driving results for them. The problem is that one thing that they're doing very well is only maybe having 2 to 3% of the budget, 5% of the budget that's being focused on that. So they actually have kind of the needle in the haystack that's already set up. They're just not identifying that that's actually what drives results. So because of the fact that they're not analyzing what's driving results and actually analyzing what's driving down funnel metrics, they're looking at some of the top funnel KPIs. The issues that they have is that they increase their budget overall or they double down overall and the results slightly increase. It doesn't double and they can't understand why that is. So for us, one of the auditing process that we go before we ever accept a client is auditing all of their paid platforms, auditing their CRM. We spend a ton of time in Salesforce and HubSpot understanding what's actually driving qualified pipeline for them. Once we understand that, we identify that and say, hey, this is what's actually moving the needle for you. This is where we're going to focus our efforts as we go after, like you mentioned at the beginning of the episode, that 3% that wants to buy. I want to get the low-hanging fruit. I want to get the short sales cycles and I want to get the quick wins because I want to prove out that we can scale this. From there, then we can build larger strategies and then we can build obviously larger budget strategies as well. But first thing I'm looking to do is just generate qualified pipeline and be able to generate customers.
And what size are your clients? Like what size SaaS companies? What is their average? Are they typically more sales-led? Are they more product-led? Walk me through a little bit of that profile of your clients.
Yeah, it's a mixture between product-led and sales-led. I personally tend to be more hands-on with sales-led organizations because I think they miss the mark the most when it comes to optimizing for customers with their paid channel acquisition strategies. Because there are so many steps to go through, if someone's coming in and requesting a demo, a lot of companies are going to look for that as the primary conversion point and how they're judging the success of the campaigns. And they consider that down funnel. Have they submitted a form? That's really as far as a lot of marketers really want to go with a lot of the paid acquisition strategies. When you peel back the curtain and you look all that down funnel data, when we have a sales-led organization, that's where we usually will have the biggest impact because of the fact that we can go in and we can analyze, we can talk to sales teams, we can understand what's actually driving results for them because not always the lowest cost lead is going to be the lowest customer acquisition cost. We have obviously the conversion rates as you move through the funnel as well. For a lot of the product-led growth companies that we talk to, the biggest issue and the biggest red flag that we see is just on attribution and conversion tracking setup. That's the biggest obstacle they see is that they actually don't know when a user converts to a customer. They don't know when a user enters a trial or gets into a self-serve led model as well. That's quite often the biggest obstacle. So it's helping them set up the tracking correctly, understanding how to pull that data back into the platforms, which again can be quite simple to get set up for them. But a lot of the time it's just something that's overlooked because it's never a priority for an internal marketer that's working on all these different campaigns, all these different initiatives. And for them, they're launching all these updates and marketing around these amazing updates, which is why the product is growing, but then wondering why their paid acquisition channels aren't driving any results. And it's because of a lot of the things that are set up on the back end.
And what tools do you use? What does that look like when you come in and you do an audit and you look at that stack? What does that look like?
Yeah, most of the time we're just in platform for a lot of it. And simple tools, Tag Manager, they're not expensive tools, they're free tools. It's Tag Manager, it's analytics, it's the CRM that they already have set up, it's the platforms that they have. We have tools like SEMrush and other tools for auditing and do some competitor research, but it's not this overly sophisticated stack that you need to have. You don't need to be spending six figures on these marketing stacks to make a lot of this work. Quite often, the clients that come to us already have the tools in place. We're not bringing that many additional tools. It's understanding how to utilize them effectively. That seems to be the missing piece.
So walk me through the actual playbook of how you get clients results. Obviously, paid ads is a big thing. Do you focus on a singular channel? Do you focus on kind of an omni-channel approach where you do a lot of retargeting across different platforms? Walk me through, if you were to break down that entire strategy. Is it the same for all of the clients, or is it a different strategy for every different SaaS business? Walk me through and break it down for us.
Yeah, it's really a different strategy for every client, but we go in with the same mentality. And that's where I say a lot of people want this silver bullet playbook that they can implement. It's not going to work the same for every client. You have to tweak it. That's why we go through an onboarding process. As we go through that, we work with all channels, but for B2B SaaS, our primary focus is always going to be Google, Bing, LinkedIn with a little bit of Meta. That's just where we have the right conversions, is where we have people that we want to target are actually hanging out. We want to meet them where they're already at. The first thing that we're going to do, and if you're looking at this as step by step and you're listening and thinking, how do I do this for myself? First thing to do, go into your CRM, confirm that the analytics and the UTM tracking is set up correctly between your ad platforms and you have it all connected to the CRM. If you have issues there, none of the rest of this is going to make sense for you. So the first thing you need to do is make sure that that's set up correctly. The way to check that, and the easiest way, if you're running paid search ads, Google Ads right now, for instance, if you go into HubSpot and you have original source paid search and original source drill down 1 and 2 isn't showing the search terms that they're coming in from, you don't have it set up correctly. You don't have the UTM parameters set up. Go in and fix that. That's going to give you a lot of that data. That's something that we see a lot of the time is people just don't simply have that set up. Once you have that set up and you have data coming through, now start to look at over the last 12 to 18 month window, have you driven any SQLs, opportunities and customers from your paid search, for instance, from your paid search strategies? Look at the search terms that they're actually driving opportunities. We did this audit recently with a client where all of the qualified opportunities had the same 3 words in them, and all the customers had the same 3 search terms that we're looking for, but they were spending on a massive amount of search terms on Google trying to expand the reach and expand how many search terms they could be for, despite the fact that it was really 1 to 2 variants of this exact same search term, what was driving all of their qualified pipeline and customers. And for them, their search impression share was so low because they weren't maximizing it. That for us is a very easy win to go in and maximize that search impression share, maximize the bidding on the right type of search terms and the right types of strategies. The other thing that you can start to do is once you've analyzed what's potentially already driving and moving the needle and driving results, make sure that you're tying back in your lifecycle stages from the platform back into the Google Ads platform, from your CRM into the actual platform itself. I'll use HubSpot as an example because HubSpot is a lot easier to do than Salesforce. And a lot of marketers are more familiar with Salesforce, with HubSpot, whereas a lot of sales reps are more familiar with Salesforce. When you get into HubSpot, the lifecycle stages of MQL, SQL, opportunity, customer, or if you have custom lifecycle stages, you can pull that data back in as an event and a conversion event into the ad platforms, whether that's Google, LinkedIn, Meta, whatever platform you want to. That allows you to now start to optimize down funnel as a primary conversion. And for marketers that are listening that are obviously familiar with that, for those that aren't, this is the conversion point we're going to use in something like Google. So when we're driving results now, instead of actually optimizing the platforms for top of funnel leads, now we're starting to optimize them for SQLs, opportunities, customers, tie that revenue back in. It also allows us to tie back the revenue or the associated revenue from new deals, from qualified pipeline, so we can get into some of the more automated bidding strategies on these platforms, such as target ROAS, such as CPAs, and it allows us to have really take advantage of the best components of these platforms, but actually driving it for B2B SaaS and large ACV projects and types of businesses, which historically you've not been able to do. These strategies used to work very well with e-commerce, but you couldn't move them out of e-commerce. At the moment, you can do a lot of this with large ACV using the CRM data that you have and pulling in that qualified pipeline.
Speaking of ACV, is there a type of SaaS company that shouldn't be thinking about paid advertising versus one that should be?
It's tough to say. When we look at ACVs, we're looking for a minimum ACV of around 25,000 for a sales-led organization. On the product-led, it gets into more of the CAC payback periods. And what we look for is somewhere between a 6 to 12 month CAC payback period from our paid advertising spend. So what that means effectively, if you're not familiar, is if it costs you $600 to acquire a customer using paid advertising and your monthly subscription is $100, your CAC payback period in that instance is 6 months. 6 months later, you break even effectively. What we're looking for is that 6 to 12 month window for product-led organizations to where we'll scale ads. If you're outside of the 12-month window, if you're 12 to 18 months, you're at a point where we would call that stable and where we would continue to maintain and continue to optimize until we can drag it into that 6 to 12 month window. We have clients that are 3 to 6 months who are just growing exponentially right now because we've really figured out and we're pulling all that data back into the platforms.
So let's talk about that then. What else do you think about when it comes to this process? Because obviously the payback period isn't simply a factor of your advertising. It's a factor of your onboarding, how easy your product is, time to value, all sorts of stuff, right? Or the trial conversion rates, all of that stuff. So how do you factor that in when you work with your clients?
Yeah, so for us, we're trying to get to revenue as soon as possible. So when we talk about the trial to purchase conversion rate on a product-led company, that's something that we're constantly monitoring and trying to focus on. However, the conversion from a trial to a customer can vary simply based on the type of conversion point that you have for the platform. So if we have a trial as a primary conversion in Google, for instance, and we're optimizing for trials, the conversion rate to a purchase could be far lower than if we had that primary conversion as a purchase, because it's going after the right type of people. So these are some of the metrics where, again, they're important to keep an eye on. But I'm really focused on what drives revenue. I'm not focused on the conversion rate from trial to purchase. If we see with the same campaign that is fluctuating, absolutely, we may need to address that. When we launch micro experiments within the onboarding process to test the conversion rate and we can see those effects in paid search or from paid social, that's a great understanding to be able to see that we can have those changes. But in terms of the other things that come into this, and you're right, with a CAC payback period, the example I've just given, it's a really simplified version. But again, when you add in all the context, you're not going to have a 6 month CAC payback period. Most of the time, companies are closer to 18 to 24 months when you add in all the layers of what you have right now. The hardest thing is most early stage companies don't understand those metrics and have those facts on hand of what the actual customer acquisition cost is outside of paid acquisition, which is why we simplify it and say, okay, 6 to 12 months, if we're doing that with just paid, that's where we can profitably scale this. That usually puts us at a point where we're at a CAC to LTV ratio around 3. That's the focus of where we want to be with this. But you're right, there's tons of other factors that you can bring into this, and we can sit and dispute whether from a sales rep, whether we're including commissions in a customer acquisition cost. There's all these different things that we can tie into it. The important thing is, can you find something that makes sense for the platforms to understand so that they can optimize for the right events? That's the way that we will run a lot of our marketing campaigns to get the best results.
Okay. And when you think about the actual advertising platforms themselves, you mentioned obviously the search platforms of Google, Bing, etc. You said a little bit of Meta, but yeah, that typically doesn't really speak to the audience, especially on the B2B side. LinkedIn, you mentioned as well. Walk me through how you think and approach LinkedIn. I understand you still approach it the same way in the sense of we're passing back the data from the CRM for a conversion and actual customer. So we, of course, want LinkedIn to go and find lookalike audience for that customer. But is that your approach? Is it, because obviously it's very different when we're thinking search and search intent, keywords around best analytics tools and stuff like that, versus I'm browsing on LinkedIn and I come across an analytics tool in my newsfeed. So how do you approach LinkedIn compared to search?
Yeah, so the way to approach LinkedIn and the way that we'll look at that is twofold. Firstly, does your budget allow you to move away from search and just using LinkedIn retargeting? And the reason I say that is, like you mentioned, high intent is going to be your low-hanging fruit. That's going to be the quick wins that you can go after. If you have a $50,000 a month budget and you find that on search you have the ability to scale up to a couple $100,000 in potential search on there, then it may not make sense to test all these platforms. And this is, again, something that I think a lot of marketers get stuck in the way with is we need to be everywhere. You don't. You need to see where you're going to drive results from. Once you drive results, then you can move into other platforms and be very successful. Sometimes we'll find that some companies don't have a ton of demand existing already. So people aren't actively searching for the solution. That's where we now need to utilize really what I'd say cold campaigns on LinkedIn. The way that we'll do that is we'll go after target list of accounts. So it's all about identifying your ICP and building those target list of accounts. You don't want to just blindly market on LinkedIn, lookalike audiences. You want to really narrow down the type of companies that you want to be marketing towards. Even better if you can get a list of the exact companies that you want to target and tailor the messaging, whether that's divided up by industry, by size of company, by technology that they're using. That's the way that we'll use LinkedIn to drive results. It's about being as customized as possible. It's about making sure the budget is utilized as effectively as possible, and we'll run it in different layers. So a lot of the top of the funnel approach that we have there is really general sky cover, which is brand awareness campaigns. And I know I talked about how I don't want to do brand awareness. This is where I'm looking for engagement levels. On LinkedIn, when we see companies that are high engaging, we'll pull all that data back into the CRM. This company shows high engagement. This job title is showing high engagement at this company. Can we layer in sales to start reaching out to them already to proactively bring them as a potential opportunity before they submit a form? Once we then set up different retargeting layers underneath, we can start to drive more direct response, which is where the lifecycle stages and form submissions that you mentioned will come in. But those are really the ways that we'll look to utilize this. And there's a lot that we can talk about. I know we're short on time, so there's a lot that we can do. And again, if anybody has questions, happy to answer any questions that you have specifically on this, because I could do a whole 30 minutes just talking about the LinkedIn strategies we use.
Yeah, I'm sure we could dive into a big rabbit hole and unpack a lot of this. But of course, as you mentioned, this show is a 20-minute show and we have come up on time, but you have been extremely gracious with your time and shared with us some really clear, actionable strategies. And I really, truly appreciate that. Where can people learn more about you? Where can they follow you?
Yeah, you can find me on LinkedIn, just a Chris Roche on LinkedIn. My agency is Catalyst, so catalystconsulting.services. If you just Google Catalyst Consulting, will come up. And you can find us on LinkedIn there as well. Those are probably the best ways to reach out to myself or learn more about the company.
Awesome. Chris, thank you again for sharing your insights and some of your playbooks with everybody. It has been extremely insightful.
Yeah, thanks for having me.